Hi, I'm Douglas Mason, President and CEO of Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp., RMO, on the TSX Venture Exchange. Rainy Mountain Royalty Corp. is a Canadian-based mineral exploration project generator. The company currently holds multiple property interests in Ontario with joint venture partners and is seeking further joint venture partners for other drill-ready properties in our portfolio. For more information, please visit our website at rmroyalty.com or call me at 604-922-2030.
Welcome to the Goddard Report. Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. Here is Jim Goddard.
My guest is investigative reporter Spencer Fernando. You can find his articles at SpencerFernando.com. Welcome back to the show, Spencer.
Good to be here.
In Calgary, the citizens have just voted no to holding the Winter Olympics. Was that a wise move on the citizens' part, even though it's a non-binding vote?
Yeah, I think it was a good move. I think people are looking at the Olympics in a lot of other countries, and, it works out every once in a while, but in many cases there's massive cost overruns. And, I think people are just wanting their governments to focus more on the basics, get, public safety, fix the roads, take care of basic things like that, and, just felt the Olympics weren't a good idea at this time.
Do you think the folks in Calgary looked up at all those empty office towers and thought, if we don't have enough business to fill those towers, we certainly don't have enough tax support to hold a Winter Olympics?
Yeah, I think so. I mean, people can see that it's still pretty tough times for a lot of people in Calgary. City is really struggling in many ways, and, doesn't seem like a place that can afford the Olympics right now.
Do you think they looked around, although Vancouver, I guess on paper, broke even or made a little money? The other Winter Olympics held now, the ones in Korea and in Russia, cost billions of dollars to put on, and even during the games, the local merchants were complaining that they weren't getting the business they were promised. Do you think Calgarians are looking, saying, even though you have all these tourists, a lot of them are on prepaid packages where really they don't spread the wealth around locally?
Yeah, I think people have seen enough from past Olympics, and you're really seeing that doesn't really work out for a lot of cities. And, if the city was doing very well financially, then maybe it's a risk they could afford to take. But I think the majority of people looked and said, if this doesn't go well, the city's already having a tough time, and it would be pretty devastating to be in a huge financial hole from the Olympics. So not a risk worth taking.
Now, I haven't checked with the people of Whistler since this decision. I think Whistler was looking forward to hosting more Olympic competition, but then Whistler doesn't have to build anything. The jumping center's already there, the hotels are already there, and they see hundreds of thousands of tourists every year, so what's a few more? It wouldn't be a big difference to that town. They don't have to build anything. Yeah.
Yeah, I mean, it wouldn't be a huge change for them, so the cost would be lower, but Calgary would probably have to do a lot. And, I think, again, big risk for them financially.
Tony Clement, is he Canada's version of Anthony Weiner?
Yeah, that's an unfortunate thing. It's obviously not the best, it seems, on his part. Kind of embarrassing, so you feel a little bad on one hand. It's disappointing. I mean, the media gave it a lot of coverage, I understand, because it's kind of, funny. I even made kind of a funny tweet about it. But at the end of the day, I mean, governments do a lot worse things. So, I guess it's worth talking about a bit, but it's pretty minor in the grand scheme of things.
In Canada, for example, one person's indiscretion doesn't seem to be as embarrassing as it is in the U.S. Why is that?
I think there's just more, in Canada, to an extent at least, more of a view that there should be separation between politicians' personal lives and private lives, and we should mostly stay out of their personal lives. The media, one thing I would credit Canadian media with in some ways is they tend to be more respectful of the private lives of politicians. And the flip side is America's also, it's the biggest media market in the world, right? So everything there just gets magnified and becomes a world news story. And that just adds to it.
Yes, for example, I don't recall anybody going to Tony's wife right now or his children asking them up close and personal will they think of their husband's or their father's behavior?
Yeah, I think it's good to be respectful of families and tough things like that. And again, this really doesn't affect most Canadians in the long run. And I think most people, they'll kind of look at it, maybe have a chuckle, but I think most people have already moved on from it.
Is Mr. Clement a security risk because he was on the Canadian Security Committee?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I think they're investigating that, so I think they'll find out. I would be surprised if that's what happened, but you never know. I guess they'll find out when they investigate.
Yeah, we find out there was a blackmail attempt associated with it. Is it better for people in a situation like that to come clean right away and ask for forgiveness, because usually people do forgive and forget?
I think so. I mean, I think people are pretty forgiving of people, politicians even, when they're willing to admit a mistake and own up to it and take responsibility for it. And I mean, in that case, if there was a security issue, then that would be another reason to have come forward right away. But I guess we'll find out.
Also, there seems to be a real inconsistency in Ottawa on how you deal with people involved in sexual allegations or scandals. Sometimes they're kicked straight out of caucus and banned. Other times it's kind of like a wink and a nudge and they're allowed to stay in power. Do you think there needs to be a more consistent policy on all parties' parts, or even on a government level, when it comes to behavior like this?
Well, I think it's tough to be consistent because these are all different things, right? I mean, in Clement's case, it doesn't sound like, for what he got in trouble with, it doesn't sound like there was anyone who wasn't consenting to anything. There have been, articles about overall pattern of behavior. It seems like what he really got in trouble for was telling Scheer that it was isolated, and then Scheer finding out that there was more than one thing that happened, apparently. So I think it's the honesty aspect that was a problem. But consistency is tough. I mean, these are all different cases, and you don't want some sort of thing where you just either you don't do anything or you get rid of people right away. I think it has to be a case-by-case basis.
We'll have more with Spencer Fernando right after this.
I'm Greg Johnston, CEO of Carl Data Solutions, an industrial Internet of Things company that provides big data solutions for monitoring critical infrastructure. Carl Data offers machine learning and predictive analytics features through our cloud-based applications to deliver key asset-saving operational insights from massive amounts of data. Carl Data trades on the CSE symbol CRL and the pink symbol CDTAF. For more details on Carl Data, please visit carlsolutions.com.
Avon Resources Limited is a gold exploration company with significant projects in British Columbia, Saskatchewan, and the Yukon. Trading on the TSX Venture Exchange, symbol ABN, and the pink symbol ABN-AF. Surrounded by world-class gold deposits and mines, Avon's 23,000 hectares Forest Kerr Gold Project is located in the heart of the Golden Triangle in northwestern BC. For more information, visit us at avonresources.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Spencer Fernando. Spencer, I didn't really hear much about Andrew Scheer's trip to India. Did anything interesting happen? Did he make new friends, new policies? Did he make Canada look better? I really didn't hear much, or did he have much coverage to start with?
It didn't get much coverage. I wrote about it a bit. He didn't make any mistakes, it seems. So that's probably one reason it didn't get much coverage. Unlike Trudeau's trip, it wasn't really controversial. I think he probably made Canada look better by just showing up, wearing a suit, acting like a regular person instead of his obvious pandering. So I think to that extent it's good. But that's one of the problems Scheer has. And if you look at the media coverage, you wouldn't really know that Scheer leads the second biggest party in the country. Maxime Bernier gets a lot of media coverage because he's controversial to a lot of people in media. Justin Trudeau obviously gets a lot of coverage because he's the prime minister and he's, good at influencing the media. If he's good at anything, he's good at that. And so Scheer's kind of a boring person. Scheer would probably be a pretty good prime minister, smart guy, seems to have a good head on his shoulders, and I think he would know how to deal with things. But he's going to have trouble because he's not exciting. He doesn't bring in the ratings, doesn't bring in the clicks, and that's what a lot of the media is based on now.
Yes, I mean, Justin's an international personality. They even have sketches with him in the Tracy Ullman show. And when was the last time you saw a Canadian prime minister featured in an international skit on a show produced in England.
Yeah, I mean, Trudeau's a celebrity, and Bernier is controversial because of his ideas, right? At least to the media, his ideas are controversial. So that leaves Scheer in a tough spot because he's obviously not as controversial as Bernier to the media in the media's eyes, and he's not nearly as like he's not a celebrity at all like Trudeau. So that leaves him in a tough spot. The one benefit he has is I think you can't know for sure, but I think he'll do pretty well in the debates. You know, he's pretty smart, pretty quick on his feet. So I think he'll do well there. And if people just tune in late and say, "Oh, this Scheer guy seems okay," then he might actually do very well. But it's going to be tough for him to get the kind of media attention that he needs.
How damaging could it be for him to have said, "I might make marijuana criminal again"?
I'm sure the Liberals will try to use that against him. He did backtrack pretty quickly. But just because he backtracked doesn't mean the Liberals won't pretend that he never backtracked and used the comment. It could hurt him. You know, that's a tough issue for the Conservatives because there's a lot of, and for the Liberals too, actually. There's an article I read talking about how a lot of people in the, Canadian Chinese community are not a fan of legalization. So there are some ridings the Liberals are worried about. For Conservatives, it can be a problem because there are a lot of Conservatives who lean more towards the libertarian side. You know, I'd probably call myself among one of those who kind of says, government should stay out of most personal issues like that. And, legalizing marijuana, not perfect. Maybe decriminalizing would have been the better way to go. But, clogging up the court system and jails with people for marijuana, not really a smart idea. So, yeah, it's a tough issue for all the parties, and I don't think that's going to help them, not with young voters, not with more libertarian-leaning Conservatives, but I don't think it's going to be the big issue the election's fought on.
How do you get millennials out to vote?
Well, I think one big thing is the affordability crisis. It gets some attention, but not enough. Millennials are facing really the prospect of being the first generation in a while that's looking to do worse than their parents financially, even in some cases in life expectancy, actually. It's some pretty disturbing numbers. A lot of people can't afford to own a home. It's tough to even find apartments. I mean, as you know, in Vancouver and many of the major cities, housing prices are absurd. So I think, addressing that with actual ideas is going to be important. The Conservatives can talk about tax cuts, but I think they need to frame things too. The carbon tax makes everything more expensive, which makes the affordability crisis worse for millennials, and they need to tie everything together and really show how it's all connected.
What about politicians like John Horgan, the Premier of BC, who says, well, what's just another 1 or 2 cents more at the pump? But the thing is, when you add the cost of energy, everything that comes to your home has been in a truck at some point. So it's not just the price you pay at the pump, is it? It increases the price of everything from your food to your clothing.
Yeah, that's the thing, I think it's tough to really get your mind around just how complicated, it's like the whole pencil thing, right? Just the amount of different inputs and different factories and different things that are required to make a pencil. I mean, it's unbelievable. So you think of a cell phone or you think of, a car or anything else. And so when you raise the price of energy, then it spreads out the entire economy and it keeps growing and growing. And the other thing is it also impacts confidence, right? Because people know it's going to go up next year and the year after that, the year after that. So I think that has a negative impact on people's confidence in the economy because it's in the back of their mind. They know, it's going to be worse. It's going to get worse. And yeah, it's easy for a politician who has a big pension and a nice salary to say, it's just a little increase, but it does add up.
Plus, for the politicians in Victoria, it's a small city. Everything in downtown Victoria is walking distance. You don't have to commute great distances there to get anything. So you lose perspective as well.
Yeah, that's not the typical experience for most people in the country, so.
Yes, they forget Canada, second largest nation in the world and the coldest. We kind of need energy to stay warm. And
just a bit.
Yeah, just a little bit. Washington State is known to be quite a green state, and yet for the third time, the voters there have voted down a carbon tax, and BC has to compete with Washington State. How does Canada compete with a country right next door, our biggest trading partner, that doesn't believe in carbon taxes?
Yeah, well, right now we don't compete. I mean, we're losing. Investments leaving Canada, going to the States. I mean, the energy industry is suffering. I mean, it's common sense, right? I mean, a few years ago when Obama was in power in the States and Harper was in power here, Canada had no carbon tax. We had a lower business tax rate and pretty reasonable regulations. And, you know, things weren't perfect here, but there was certainly investment. Now, if you're an investor, you look, okay, you've got two countries, one biggest economy on earth, no carbon tax, lower corporate taxes than Canada, much smaller economy, higher taxes, higher regulations, and a carbon tax. I mean, it's a no-brainer where people are going to go.
We'll have more with Spencer Fernando right after this.
Arctic Star Exploration, operated by a team of proven mine finders, is focused on diamonds in Finland and the Northwest Territories of Canada. Work programs are underway in Finland and Canada. Arctic Star trades on the TSX Venture Exchange symbol ADD, on Frankfurt symbol 82A1, and the OTCQB symbol ASDZF. Please visit our website arcticstar.ca or call us at 604-689-1799.
Don't miss out. Stay informed. Receive the HowStreet.com weekly recap with thought-provoking podcasts, radio, and articles delivered to your inbox. Sign up for the HowStreet.com weekly recap on our homepage at HowStreet.com.
Welcome back. We're speaking with Spencer Fernando. Spencer, do you think identity politics is racist?
I think so. I mean, different people define it different ways, but I'd say the definition that we see most often from the left is where they focus only on people as, you know, you're part of this race, so you're either a victim group or you're part of the victimizer group. And I think it is racist. I mean, the whole idea that I thought the world was trying to get past was that you don't judge people based on their race and you treat them based on their actions and what they do. So to think that somehow the left says, oh, forget about all that, it's all about race again, seems pretty messed up to me.
Stats Canada has been dipping into our private banking info. Is this really the right thing to do? And they claimed, oh, it's perfectly legal, but even the privacy commissioner was shocked at how egregious this action was.
Well, yeah, I don't think it's the right thing for them to be doing at all. It's amazing they're even allowed to do it. I think, you know, said the Conservatives, if they get in the next election, need to, because the Liberals will never do it, but the Conservatives need to introduce legislation that takes the ability for Stats Can to do any of that stuff away. I mean, again, the government's supposed to work for us, not the other way around. So Stats Can complains, oh, we don't have good enough info, so we're going to make you give us your banking records without even asking. That's not how anything is supposed to work. I mean, that's not how the government's supposed to be. Government's supposed to work for us. And if we say, no, you can't have our banking info, then they shouldn't be allowed to take it. So, you know, hopefully this wakes up Canadians to the danger of big government and the reason government needs to be limited.
Were you surprised the privacy commissioner was lied to by Stats Canada about how far they had gone and planned to go?
Yeah, I'm not really surprised by too much with bureaucracies anyway. I think Stats Canada has become very arrogant, kind of power hungry, and they don't feel accountable to anybody. So it's not surprising that they would be deceptive.
Are the Canadian oil sands losing money from investors?
Yeah, it's not going well there. There was actually just one of the big investors, 1.7 trillion, invested overall in the world energy industry, including a lot in Canada. They just issued a warning saying, and in an open letter to Trudeau, warning that the policies of the government are causing investors to lose confidence in the Canadian energy industry, lose confidence in the oil sands, and look elsewhere. So, and there's the new pipeline legislation, which is the government has said is supposed to help, but every reasonable observer says it makes it basically impossible to get pipelines approved, and it's not going well at all here.
What does the government have to do to get oil flowing? I mean, we're looking at Western Canadian Select selling for less than $50 or more less than the world price for oil. How can Alberta and the rest of Canada make any money at that level?
Yeah, I mean, they can't. I mean, it's going to cost Alberta $5 billion if the discount continues at this rate. Well, I think one big thing that needs to be done is they need to, look at these organizations that are getting money from, rich people in the U.S. to attack the Canadian energy industry. They need to stop that flow of money, so you have to ban that money from coming in. Government needs to do a huge, I'd say, public service campaign, or public awareness campaign on the oil sands and why it should be supported. And, they need to streamline regulations, put legislation in to make it easier to get pipelines approved. And, I mean, again, a big part of it is public opinion. So the government has to really fight for the industry and fight for public opinion and get rid of these groups that are trying to turn public opinion against the oil sands. Obviously, the Canadian groups have a right to say whatever they want. It's a free country. But when money's coming in from foreign countries to try to take down the oil sands, that's a problem, and that should not be allowed at all.
Right. The U.S. funding, they don't call it the oil sands. They call it the tar sands. But it's been pointed out to me, tar is an artificial invention that you have to put together. Oil, you don't.
Yeah, I mean, it's just a rhetorical device for them. It's interesting, Vivian Krause, Canadian researcher, she had looked into it. And the tar sands campaign, as it's called, that's what they called it, was funded in large part by the Rockefeller Brothers Foundation. And what's funny about that is the Rockefellers, rich U.S. family, they made their fortune in oil. So now they're targeting Canadian oil to take Canada out of the oil market, which of course benefits the U.S. because we're forced to send our cheap oil to them, and we don't compete with their oil companies. So again, a lot of groups in Canada are really being tricked and are being used by groups that say they support the environment, but are actually about destroying the Canadian energy industry. So again, this is something everyone needs to be aware of. It's a huge industry in Canada, tons of jobs, tons of money, and we're letting it really be wrecked by foreign money.
Bombardier has told 5,000 employees to take a hike, despite receiving repeated bailouts from both the Quebec and Canadian governments. How fair is that to taxpayers who risked a lot to help these guys out?
Well, it's not fair at all. I mean, it's disgraceful. I mean, you've got the CEOs and the CEO and the board. They keep failing miserably and then begging taxpayers for money, and then they give themselves bonuses as if they should be rewarded for failing. If anyone else, if you run a small business and you run it so badly that you run out of money and then you have to go demand taxpayers give you money, the last thing you should be doing is giving yourself a bonus, right? But when it's a big company, everyone just, whatever. So it's disgraceful. I blame a lot on the CEO, obviously, Alain, Bellemere, or as I call him now, Alain Bailout Bellemere. I think everyone should refer to him as Bailout Bellemere from now on. But a lot of responsibility also on the government. I mean, they had a lot of leverage over Bombardier when they asked for money, and they should have used it. They should have said, fine, you want money, then one condition, no job cuts in Canada. If you need to move jobs around, fine, but you have to put people in a job paying just as much. So, and I'd say, we need a stronger military, so Bombardier has to start designing our own homegrown Canadian, Air Force or air design industry, airplane design industry. And they have to do that for free. So, really, Bombardier's gotten all the benefits of being nationalized, which is the security of being able to fail constantly and not go under, with none of the drawbacks. Their CEOs keep paying themselves a bunch of money. They're able to do whatever they want. Trudeau even said, we don't like to interfere in free market companies. Well, you're not a free market company if you're being bailed out constantly by taxpayers. So, yeah, lots of failure all around. Failure by the Bombardier board, failure by their CEO, and failure by the government to give them money without getting anything in return.
Yes, and I look at their failures with the C series having to sell it off to Airbus. One of the biggest drawbacks was that the engines that they were designing weren't very good or didn't work right. Why not just buy something off the shelf? Rolls-Royce or General Electric make very good turbo engines. They sell off their Q turboprop series, which was very successful around the world and a money maker, and they got rid of their flight simulation branch, which again was a huge money maker, sustainable. You don't have to make a lot of money. Do you think they're still making questionable business decisions with things like that?
Oh yeah, it seems like total incompetence. I mean, to lose money over and over again, keep getting bailed out and keep failing. I mean, there's really no other way to look at it. I mean, there's other companies that do what Bombardier does who don't need a bunch of taxpayer money and make more money every year. So it's not that the industry itself is impossible. There are companies around the world that are doing well. So that's a big problem. And, I mean, just now, obviously their CEO is trying to be optimistic about it, but nobody's buying it. I mean, their stock has lost 30% of their value in the last, week. So their cost for insuring their debt has gone way up. So, yeah, it's not going well for them.
Yeah, I would think one of Bombardier's earlier failures is that they designed the first SkyTrain cars in Vancouver, and those cars would not run in the snow. Funny, from the company that invented the Skidoo.
Yeah,
So-
not too smart. It's unfortunate because as much as I would say, just, let them go under, the problem is there's a lot of Canadian jobs at risk. But I think if the government's going to do anything to help them, they have to get certain conditions. You have to protect Canadian jobs. I mean, we're basically paying for a company that is making itself less and less Canadian and getting rid of jobs in Canada. So if there's going to be help for them, it has to be help that actually benefits Canadian jobs, Canadian workers, and Canada as a whole. I mean, make Bombardier do certain things for the government for free. Make them design military aircraft for free. Help them develop an industry for, the Canadian military. But if we're just going to give them money and get absolutely nothing in return and actually lose, then it looks pretty stupid.
Well, it looks to me there would probably be a big market if you made a big scoopable firefighting aircraft, kind of like the Mars water bomber, which every government in the world now refuses to use because it's old. Look at the devastating fires in California and British Columbia over the past couple of years. They really need something that can get water loaded aboard quickly and dump it on a fire. And I don't see anybody developing that kind of an aircraft. Maybe Bombardier could find a market there.
They could. Unfortunately, it just seems that there's not too much creative thinking going on there. And I think that's part of the problem with being bailed out constantly. It's the moral hazard kind of idea. And they're just, in the back of their minds, they think, well, if we don't do well, we'll just get bailed out anyway, so who cares?
Is there any hint of corruption around Bombardier, like SNC Lavalin, which is based in Montreal, which has been accused of being one of the most corrupt companies on the planet?
I haven't seen anything that looks like corruption in the legal sense. What I would say is there can be corruption just in the, whether it's, I don't know if I'd say moral sense or common sense, kind of idea, where something can be legal, but it still feels kind of corrupt. And I think if you look at, the Bombardier board, I mean, I think they have connections, people have connections to Trudeau at some levels. I think just how embedded they are, especially in Quebec, maybe they don't have to technically bribe politicians, and I don't think they do bribe any politicians officially or even behind the scenes. But it's just the threat is always there, right? Well, if you don't bail us out, then you'll take the blame for this big Canadian company going down, so you better pay up. And so, yeah, it might not be corrupt in any legal sense, but it certainly feels pretty messed up. Private company that whenever they get in trouble just goes and says, we're going to go down. You can't have that happen on your watch. Give us more money. At some point they have to either succeed or fail on their own merits.
Stick to doing what they do best, making snowmobiles.
Yeah.
Spencer,
a lot of companies are good at just good at one thing and they do well. So we'll see.
And when was the last time? Well, I was going to say last time you saw a flying Skidoo, but then I do watch the extreme games, and Skidoos for at least a brief period of time can fly.
Yeah. For a bit.
Spencer, thank you so much for being on the show.
Good to be here.
My guest has been investigative reporter Spencer Fernando. You can find his articles at spencerfernando.com. You're listening to the Goddard Report on TalkDigitalNetwork.com. Find us on Twitter at TalkDigitalNet. Our YouTube channel is Talk Digital Network. Questions for the show or our guests can be sent to info@HowStreet.com. I'm Jim Goddard. Thanks for listening.
Comments made on the Goddard Report and TalkDigitalNetwork.com are an expression of opinion only. The Goddard Report is available online and mobile at TalkDigitalNetwork.com. The Goddard Report is a production of How Street Media Incorporated.